Hey, BCista here, and welcome to week 4 of the VDL. This week we're playing against the Bulky Dragons. So far we are 1-2 on the season. This is an incredibly important week. There's a huge difference between 2-2 and 1-3, and in addition to that, my second half of my season is significantly more difficult team compositions that I have to play than I do in this week. So I'm definitely hoping to get a win here, and hoping to get a good start into the second half of my season. So here's the matchup. So my opponent's team has some really scary Pokemon for me to deal with, namely Paloswine, Lantern, Klefki, and in addition, they have some pretty annoying Pokemon like Latias and Gengar. And so I definitely expect them to either be trying to get Tailwind up with Latias or Trick Room with either Gengar or Malamar. And so the big idea is to kind of be able to prevent either of those leads. And the most consistent way I can think of is Scyther, since Scyther can one-shot both Latias and Malamar and Gengar. And so that's definitely the big lead to be able to counter those. Other than that, the main idea is just, to kind of be able to deal with those kind of 6 Pokemon I mentioned, because those are definitely the 6 I'm expecting to see. So anyways, with that, let's get into the match. Here we are for game 1. Looking at my opponent's team, they pretty much have the exact 6 I was expecting. And so my game 1 lead plan was to lead Tornadus and Scyther and have Skarmory in the back. And then the 4th was mainly between the bottom 3. And because, they do in fact have the Lantern, I decided that it seems like Landorus is probably the best because it does hit those for super effective damage. So let's get into the match. So my opponent leads Klefki Malamar, and I lead the Scyther Tornadus. So my Scyther should easily one-shot Malamar even through a Bug Resist Berry. So I'm just going to go for the X-Scissor to do some to try to get the kill, and then the Taunt into the Klefki, hoping it's not Mental Herb. Even if it is Mental Herb and they get up a Reflect, I should one-shot Malamar if it's not a berry. However, they switch out the Palosine into this, and we get the Taunt into the Klefki. And so we see that the Klefki was going for Reflect and does not have a Mental Herb, which is a really big deal. And we see that the X-Scissor does pretty good damage, and hopefully with the combination of another X-Scissor and a Heat Wave, I should be able to get the kill. So we get the Heat Wave off, and that does a huge chunk of damage into the Paloswine and burning it. In addition to that, we also get the X-Scissor off, and that ends up getting the kill. And so really big deal. Not only that, I also believe that the Paloswine reveals that it's not thick fat there. And then the Dazzling Gleam ends up doing very small amount of damage. So from here, they end up switching into the Latias, and so here the X-Scissor should be a guaranteed one-shot, and I decided to set up Tailwind so I can guarantee outspeed the Latias. And the Latias ends up protecting, and they end up I end up getting the Tailwind up, and the X-Scissor gets blocked, and they go for another Dazzling Gleam, doing a little bit of chip damage. So this is definitely not that big of a deal, because as you can see, the Dazzling Gleam is not doing huge chunks of damage into either of my Mons. So I just go again for the X-Scissor, and I go for the Taunt here because the Taunt shook off. And the Latias ends up going for an Ally Switch. So Ally Switch is generally really annoying, but in this situation it's not that bad, given the fact that the offensive threat is the Pokemon that use the Ally Switch rather than the other way around. If Klefki went for an Ally Switch here, it would have been really annoying. But here the Klefki, though, does able to get up a Reflect, which is pretty convenient for them. And they take a very soft 4x resisted Bug or X-Scissor. So here, though, I go for the X-Scissor into the Latias and then the Taunt to the Klefki. The X-Scissor has a pretty good chance to honestly one-shot even with the Reflect up. And we end up taunting the Klefki again, and we get the X-Scissor off into the Latias, just barely missing out on the one-shot through the Reflect. So here the Ice Beam goes into the Scyther, getting the kill, and Scyther did a very good job so far, and the Latias reveals that it's life orb and dies to its life orb recoil. And the Clefairy just goes for a Dazzling Gleam, which does very little damage, but well, it does pretty good damage, but it activates my Citrus Berry, so I should probably take another one from this point. And so here I decide to just bring in the Landorus to get some good amount of damage. I could honestly see an argument to just bring in the Skarmory because I believe Skarmory honestly is guaranteed win condition in this position because I don't think Malamar has the ability to break my Skarmory. Assuming unless it has some sort of random special coverage. But here I just go for the double up into the Malamar with that with the Earthquake and Heat Wave. The Heat Wave also does reasonable damage into the Klefki. So here we see the Heat Wave ends up doing pretty good damage to Klefki, but very minimal damage to Malamar, showing that it's very specially bulky. And however, the Earthquake does, or Earth Power does quite a bit. And with the Dazzling Gleam, I take a little bit of chip damage, but not a huge amount. And they are able to get up Trick Room, which is, pretty much what we expected there. So from here, I check the number of turns of Taunt left on this and the number of turns of Reflect. And the main decision is whether or not I want to kill Klefki or Malamar. And I decided to go for the Klefki because I don't want it to get another Reflect or Light Screen up. And I don't want to deal with any of the prankster shenanigans. So the Rock Slide goes off and ends up killing my Tornadus. But as I said, I'm very much in a commanding position here because I'm pretty sure Skarmory can actually 2v1 the remaining two Pokemon. And with the Earth Power, we are able to get the kill on the Klefki. And so this game definitely went really well. This went about as well as I could hope for. And we are able to get the Skarmory out. And now the game's pretty much just set in stone. We'll go for the Earth Power, and the main question is Iron Defense or just Body Press. I decided to go for an Iron Defense because I don't think the Body Press is going to kill, and technically I think this is the most optimal way to win the game. And so we get the Iron Defense off, and we get the Earth Power off, and we're able to get the kill on the Malamar, winning the game. So definitely went really well. I'm definitely very happy with how that game went. And, now the main question is just how are they going to adjust into game 2? Here we are for game 2. So I was very happy with my lead, and so I decided to just stick with it. And so the main question is just, should I mix up anything, or should I just kind of run it back? And, I considered running Thundurus, but I'm like, I don't know. Thundurus doesn't seem that good into any of the mons they brought. And I considered Articuno, which Articuno seems like it could be very good into some of the mons they brought, but it's definitely not great into Trick Room, and it's not great into the Pallaswine or the Malamar that we saw were, both having rock coverage. And so I decided to just run it back with the same 4. So my opponent decided to mix it up and lead Gengar Pallaswine, and I led my Scyther Tornadus. So here, I decided I probably want to kill the Gengar to prevent Trick Room, and so the main question is, do I want to go for like a Heat Wave to just get some extra damage in case it's or go for a Tailwind so I can guarantee outspeed the Gengar? And I decided to go for the Tailwind so I can guarantee outspeed the Gengar because I don't really want to take a Thunderbolt from either mon. And we get the Dual Wing Beat off, and the Dual Wing Beat is a clean kill on the Gengar, even if it was like Focus Sash or something. And here they end up going for a Rock Slide, and the Rock Slide ends up just killing my Scyther. Really sad. That's actually a roll with my EV spread of my Scyther. I'm actually 75% chance to survive that, and it's definitely a little bit sad that I didn't survive that because getting one more Dual Ring Beat off would have been huge. And so here we see that they end up bringing out the Lantern, and the Lantern is pretty concerning because I don't think I have great damage into it, and it's special unless I hit it with my Landorus. And so I decided I definitely need to target it down with my Landorus, and I just go with the Heat Wave to get some extra damage into the Pallaswine. So they go for the Ice Shard on the Pallaswine, which is definitely, noteworthy, but probably expected that they were going to have that. The Yachi Berry makes sure I can survive it pretty comfortably. We get the Heat Wave off into the Pallaswine, and it does, reasonable damage. And we get the Earth Power into the Lantern, revealing that it is, in fact, Shuka Berry. And so it's able to survive the Earth Power pretty well. And then the Thunderbolt goes into the Tornadus, killing it. And so at this point, I'm not feeling particularly great about my position. I definitely think that I'm in an awkward position because I really need to kill the Lantern because my Skarmory is very threatened by it. But I also really need to kill the Piloswine because my Landorus is threatened by it. And so here I decide to just go for the Protect because it's pretty obvious to Ice Shard into me. And I want to go for to kill the Piloswine right here, but I can't because Body Press never KOs. And so here I feel pretty forced to go for an Iron Defense. So we go for the Protect, and the Ice Shard goes into the Landorus as expected, and we get an Iron Defense up. And so at +2, I should be able to kill both Pokemon on the field with a Body Press. And however, I do take a Thunderbolt, which does a lot more than I was expecting and hoping. I was definitely expecting to take that pretty well because my Skarmory is very specially bulky. It's especially bulky enough in order to survive two Thunderbolts from a Latias, but apparently Lantern's stab damage makes it a lot more offensive. So we go for the double Protect. Because expecting the Ice Shard, they do in fact Ice Shard, and the Ice Shard does kill my Landorus, unsurprisingly. And here we get the Body Press into the Lantern. The main reason we targeted the Lantern is because if the Malamar is the Pokemon in the back, I think we have a good chance to be able to actually win this game. But if it's Gengar or Latias, we probably lose. So basically, Lantern, or if it's a Malamar or a Klefki, we're good. However, we see that the last Pokemon is in fact Latias, and we definitely makes us look not nearly as good. And I think with that, there's pretty much no way to win this game. And so with this, I just decided to go for the Roost because technically, if Latias maybe only has Ice Beam, I might have a chance. But they reveal Thunderbolt, and Thunderbolt is able to get the kill. So definitely didn't go nearly as well as it did in game 1, but I'm definitely unclear, necessarily how I can adjust. But let's get into game 3. So here we are for game 3. So that game definitely didn't go nearly as well, and so the main question is how can I adjust, if at all? And I'm trying to think if there's really any better lead than the one I've been doing, and I don't know if there's really a better lead. Nothing else really threatens Paloswine better than what I have than Scyther, in all honesty. And so I decided that I should probably just stick with those. And so I wanted to have Skarmory in the back. And so the main question is do I want Thundurus or Landorus? So Thundurus, is also electric immunity, which is a big deal. It doesn't have the 4x ice weakness, which can be useful. So definitely unclear which of the two seems like the better option. I decided I wanted to test out Thundurus because I haven't used it yet, and maybe it's extra, maybe it'll be more powerful. So my opponent leads Gengar Paloswine again, and I lead the Scyther Tornadus again. So here I decided that I think Gengar is likely going to go for a Trick Room, and that Paloswine is likely going to go for a Rock Slide. And so I decided to U-turn into the Paloswine, getting a pretty good amount of damage, and going for the Taunt on Gengar in order to prevent it from setting up the Trick Room. So this obviously could be really punished if Gengar goes for just an offensive mood, and especially if it's incredibly offensive invested and it can do a lot of damage into my Scyther. But I decided that I think it's worth the taunt into it, predicting the Trick Room. So we taunt into Gengar, which, pretty good. And we U-turn into the Paloswine, getting a pretty good chunk of damage into it and being able to switch in. In this case, the Skarmory is really the only option. So we have the Skarmory out, and they Rock Slide, and Skarmory is missed by the Rock Slide. Definitely a little bit awkward because Tornadus is of the two the only one that the miss would be relevant, and I got a crit, which is really annoying, which means that my Tornadus is a lot lower and might be in range of a Rock Slide otherwise. However, we did in fact read their Trick Room, which is really a big deal. I considered just going straight for a Body Press in the Paloswine. However, I decided to go for the Iron Defense. And here, the main question is whether or not I want to go for a Tailwind or something else. And I decided to go for a Tailwind. And so they end up switching out into the Latias. And we get the Tailwind up. And we get the Iron Defense up. So this is definitely a little bit one of the awkward positions of my Skarmory against this matchup, because as you can see, my Skarmory is not particularly defensively in a great position, and it's not particularly offensively in a great position. And so it's definitely a little bit awkward. However, we do get a free switch in, and we are able to get to bring in Scyther, which is a very good offensive threat into both of these Pokemon on my opponent's team. And so here I decide to just go for a Drill Run into the Gengar spot. And so the main question is whether or not I want to, or like what I want to lock in with the Scyther. And I decide I want to go with the U-turn to read possibly a Thunderbolt to go into that slot. And so I decided to use U-turn in the Latias. This should kill the Latias based on last game's damage calcs. However, they go for the ally switch, which is really annoying. And with that, we take a U-turn into the Gengar, doing very minimal damage because it's 4 times resisted. So in all honesty, I think maybe I should have dual wing beat and dual wing beat it instead, because if I would have done that, I think that still probably kills the Latias and actually punishes them for an ally switch that they just did, especially since I knew they had ally switch. However, they do Thunderbolt, and the Thunderous takes that as immunity. So now we see that the Gengar is in fact no longer taunted, and so now they're likely to go for a Trick Room. And so the main question is are they going to ally switch or not? So this is exclusively going to be a 50-50 read of are they going to ally switch or not. And I decide that I think that the Dark Pulse is likely going to kill the Gengar from this range, and so I just decided to go for just the Dark Pulse into that spot. And they end up not going for the ally switch, and I get the Dark Pulse into the Gengar, but it does survive, which is really sad because if I would have doubled up, I probably would be in a commanding position here. And so the Latias does get an Ice Beam off into my Thunderous, and bringing me down to Sash. And they get the Trick Room up. And not only that, I'm also in this awkward position where there's one more turn of my Tailwind, so it's even more awkward. So here, there's not much to do except just attack with the Skarmory and protect. I could switch out, but I think the damage output in Scyther seems very important. And so here I just go for the protect. And so we get the protect off. And the Thunderbolt in the Gengar goes into the Skarmory, doing honestly more damage than I was expecting because of how bulky the Gengar is, since I should be able to take 2 of those. So we get the kill from the Gengar. And our Tailwind is over, which is pretty relevant in the fact that now our Skarmory should underspeed the Latias, and our Thunderous might even underspeed the Latias. And so there's not much for me to do here except go for a Body Press, hope to get the one shot on, or kill the Landorus and the Dark Pulse onto the Latias. If Skarmory underspeeds Lantern, I'm probably in pretty good shape with this turn. If I don't, then I'm probably in pretty bad shape. And we see that Lantern does in fact underspeed my Lantern, which definitely makes me in a very bad position. However, we are able to get the Dark Pulse off, and the Dark Pulse is able to kill the Latias here. So now we bring in the Scyther, and we're not in very good shape at all. The Scyther likely can't take an attack from the Palace one, and there's a pretty clean just rock slide, Scald probably or something to that extent that is pretty much a guaranteed kill. Maybe, but there are 2 turns of Trick Room left, so I decided to go for the double protect. But in hindsight, that's probably a mistake. I probably should have just played around a miss on my side, because we know that they have Ice Shard on the Palace one. And so here we see that they have the Icicle Spear, and the Icicle Spear goes into the Scyther and gets all 3 hits, getting the kill. Definitely sad that I got all 3 hits. However, they did go for Thunderbolt onto with her lantern, and so this is actually really awkward, because actually if I would have just attacked with the Thunderous and Grass Knotted into the Palace Wine, I had a chance to possibly kill there, and I would actually gotten healed from the Thunderbolt. And here I just go for the double protect. There's not much I can do from here, but I ended up not getting it, and the Ice Shard kills me. Definitely a sad game. I think that if I just doubled up into the Gengar spots, I probably win this game. Without them having Trick Room, I think I was in a very good position. Sadly, I got flustered by the ally switch, and they kind of cheesed me out with it. Definitely a sad start of the season, going 1-3. Not feeling particularly good about my season, but this definitely isn't an easy matchup, and even more difficult when your opponent has random ally switch shenanigans with it on top of that. So hopefully the second half of the season is better for me, but I have some really tough matchups and against some really good coaches, so we shall see. So anyways, thank you for watching.